and welcome to today's call with Congressman Adam Smith. During this event, we'll be taking questions from constituents like you. So to ask a question, press star 3 on your telephone keypad to enter the question queue. You can also sign up for the Congressman's newsletter by pressing star 6 at any time during this call. Again, press star 3 to ask a question and star 6 to subscribe to the newsletter. With that, I'll turn it over to Congressman Smith. Congressman, the floor is yours, sir.
Great. Thank you very much. There's a lot going on and a lot to get to, so I'll try to get through at least a little bit of it, but I want to save as much time as possible for your questions and issues that you want to raise. We are in a very challenging time, in my view, and I'm going to go through a series of issues. One is all of the program cuts that President Trump is making. Various different programs being shut down, people being fired, and how that is impacting services, because it is having an impact. I met with a group of folks who work on workforce development. There's a variety of different federal grants that they have that have been frozen or cut off. I've worked with child care workers in the same situation. We've seen some of the layoffs at the Social Security Administration and how they're impacting the ability of people to get their Social Security checks. The VA has suffered some layoffs. A lot of veterans have been fired. Tens of thousands of employees have been fired. Programs have been cut. Most of that, in the opinion of the courts and others, is not legal, because these were programs that were approved by Congress and signed into law by the president, could only be cut by Congress acting. So we're pushing pressure in a variety of different places, and some of these programs have been turned back on and some people have been rehired, but it's been very, very sporadic and chaotic, and it is negatively impacting services. I'm sure you have heard that there are a lot of flights being canceled in the U.S. right now because the FAA can't handle, the technology, and also because they don't have enough air traffic controllers. I mean, that's the impact of President Trump's approach to basically terrorizing the federal workforce, threatening them with layoffs. I mean, one of my favorite examples is he asked literally everybody at the CIA to take early retirement. What if they had done that and we had no employees in our intelligence community? So that's what a chaotic approach is impacting services throughout our district and throughout the country. We're pushing back with lawsuits and a variety of different other efforts to try to get that money turned back on and to go through the normal appropriations process. But like I said, the impact has been profound. Then we have the tariffs that are coming. The tariffs are already here. The impact is coming. And I think that's one of the issues that is a little bit confusing. It takes a while. The supply chain is, done in advance. I'm sure you've heard reports of the Port of Seattle and other ports in different parts of the country and how their container traffic has slowed to next to nothing. That will soon impact our country, certainly our region and our district, in terms of access to various goods. Now, I know President Trump dismissed this as saying, people will just have to live with a couple of dolls instead of 30. It's really about the impact on the economy, not about how many toys someone can individually buy. These tariffs are hitting steel, aluminum, drywall, timber, things that go into building things. It's going to drive up the costs for people. Also drive up agricultural costs depending on what we import. So there have been efforts. The Senate has put up a couple of proposals to try to block the tariffs. One passed, one failed. I think we need to do that. Now, I want to be clear. Tariffs have a place. There is really no such thing as 100% free trade. If we use tariffs smartly, they can help grow our economy and protect our workers. President Clinton in the 1990s put tariffs on Japanese and South Korean autos, and Japanese and South Korean auto companies built plants in the U.S., and it had a positive impact. President Trump, in his first term, put tariffs on China in a way that was very helpful and helped us balance out some trade imbalances in some technology products and other things. These tariffs are aggressive, targeted at everybody, and incredibly disruptive. The negatives are going to outweigh the positives, as I'm sure you're aware. The economy actually contracted last quarter for the first time in a while. So we're worried about those. Also, throughout all of this is the actions by the Trump administration that I believe violate the Constitution and violate the law. in a number of different important areas. I think the president is abusing his power in a bunch of ways. We've seen in terms of immigration enforcement, people snatched off the streets and deported without due process. We've seen this done in defiance of court orders. The Supreme Court the Supreme Court ordered a particular immigrant from Maryland to be returned, and the Trump administration has refused to do that. It also ordered to stop deportation flights to Venezuela, and those flights kept going. So defiance of court orders is one aspect of it, but then just using the White House to punish and intimidate political adversaries, suing the media for doing stories that the president doesn't like, blocking the ability of law firms to have access to classified information in federal facilities if those law firms dare to hire Democrats. Those sorts of things are the actions of an authoritarian dictator, not of a president elected in a representative democracy. And I think we need to stand up against that type of oppression and abuse of power from the president. Then we have the budget reconciliation package Republicans are trying to put together right now. It calls for trillions of dollars in tax cuts alongside $1 trillion+ in cuts to things like Medicaid, all while driving up the debt and the deficit, primarily because of those tax cuts. Now, currently, they're having trouble passing the Medicaid cuts out of committee. This process will likely drag out over the course of the next couple of months, but I think it is imperative that we oppose this budget. I don't think this budget is fair. I think it gives too much money to the wealthy who already have a lot, jeopardizes programs that are important for working people in this country, and drives up the debt and the deficit. All of that is very important. I want you to know I'm also working on issues locally and working on issues where I think the Democratic Party needs to do a better job. It's interesting, there have been a lot of polls out as President Trump's approval ratings have plummeted on a wide range of issues, the economy, inflation, even immigration. He's underwater in some polls now, in large part because the American people don't like the idea of the government snatching people off the street without any due process and deporting them to places like El Salvador. So all of that is great, and then you get to the question, who do you trust more to deal with the problems America faces? And President Trump still does better than the Democratic Party. So I think if we are going to confront this, we have to put reasonable alternatives out there. We have to show that we support border security. We have to have an economic plan that rewards people for hard work and doesn't just rely on endless government spending. We have to have education policy that focuses on standards and achievements. We have to approach equity and inclusion in a way that doesn't place identity politics above fair results. There's a whole bunch of things we can do. Locally, number one biggest thing I'd like to see us do is build more housing. I always say if I could solve just one problem, if they gave me a magic wand and said you can solve one public policy problem, I would make housing affordable. And we simply place too many impediments in our state to building housing. My staff provided me a story. Many of you who have listened to me before have heard me tell the story of the $1.7 million toilet in San Francisco. Well, apparently we have a $2 million, well, in this case, it's, I believe, a 4 or 5 stall toilet that they're trying to build in Seattle. But it's the same story. The process has overwhelmed it. The number of people who have to sign off on it, the permits that you have to get, has made that cost $2 million. And the same impacts the ability to build housing. We need to streamline that process and build more housing and incentivize people to want to build housing. We are making some progress on the crime problem. I'm still deeply worried about juvenile crime in our region. And we also still have a major problem with homelessness and drug abuse. We can do better. And my basic philosophy on that is I want to have an approach to government that focuses on solving problems, not on ideology. But how can we take a practical, common sense look at building more housing, enforcing the law, having our school system have standards and accountability that makes sense to reward achievement and encourage people to come back to public schools. So trying to combine all of that, I'll close just by summing up my basic message. I am deeply concerned that Trump is ruling more like an autocrat than like a democratically elected president in a constitutional republic. I'm going to keep pushing on that. I'm also deeply concerned that his policies, certainly the economic policies that I outlined, but also the way he's acting internationally, threatening to invade Greenland and Panama and Canada. I think those things are making us weaker and more vulnerable as a country. But third, I want to make sure that there's some positive agenda being offered as an alternative. It's very easy for people to bash on what they don't like about President Trump all day long. But if we're going to build support for positive policies, we have to offer those policies and meet the concerns that the American people have about governance in general, not just what President Trump is doing. So that's what I'm trying to do in a nutshell. So happy to take your questions, comments, any issues you want to raise. I'll turn it back over to the moderator to take care of that.
Thank you very much, sir. A quick reminder, if you have a question you would like to ask, please press star 3 on your telephone keypad to enter the question queue. And our first question tonight, we've got Susan joining us from Kent. Susan, you are live with Congressman Smith. Go ahead with your question.
Thank you, Congressman Smith, for your service, first of all.
Thank you.
My question is kind of long. Yeah,
That's
thank
fine.
you. Sorry, there's a pause. I'm concerned. I'm a rule follower, and I'm concerned that Trump closed USAID without any approval and other agencies. He's frozen funds that have already been appropriated. He has his corrupt crypto memes and ultimately immigration. Who can hold him accountable?
Yeah, no, I think that you correctly describe the problem, and I completely agree with you. He is not following the law. I did not mention your example of USAID and also the Millennium Challenge Corporation. Foreign aid was completely eliminated against the law and against court orders. Now, the way to hold him accountable, and it's frustrating. I mean, I worked, to get him out of the White House in 2020 and to try to make sure he didn't get back in 2024. And that obviously was the best approach. I think, Democrats could have done a better job on that last front, but here he is. So what can we do? I think the lawsuits are really important. Get the courts to issue the rulings that they have issued. Now, the next step in that, and what I've been advocating for, is I think the president and his administration should be sanctioned. If you disobey court rulings, typically what happens is the court will fine you and or lock you up. I think that is an appropriate step to hold them accountable. But the other way to hold them accountable is to generate public opinion against what they are doing. And we have seen some instances where that has reversed decisions. The Social Security Administration, they had said, you had to show up in person to collect your benefits. They tried that for a few weeks. The backlash was intense, and so they allowed you once again to do it by phone. Some people have been rehired that were fired because of the pressure that was put on them. He has backed off some of the tariffs. So you need to generate public opinion. And I've said this many times. You generate public opinion, and then you put pressure on Republican members of Congress. If the House and the Senate Republicans wanted to stop President Trump, any part of President Trump's agenda, they could. They are up for election next year. They are a lot closer to the voters than President Trump will ever be. If the voters rise up and say, you are, cutting Social Security, you're firing veterans, you're blocking research. I didn't even mention the spread of measles and RFK Jr.'s, anti-science approach to dealing with the healthcare challenges that we face in this country. So you have to generate opposition and build public support. And I know how unsatisfying that is, because you want to stop him today. But there is no one speech, there is no one tweet, there's no one group of people that is going to do that. Political movements require effort and time and persistence. And we've started to see that. Protests are fine, but I think it takes more than that. And again, I'll keep coming back to what I said. When people think there's a better alternative to Trump, that will help. And it's because of a lot of the concerns they had about Democrats that turned them to him in the first place. So yes, we have to go after Trump aggressively, have to change public opinion, but we also have to show people that we've learned from some of our mistakes and we will govern better and give them that reasonable alternative. And this is a 24/7, 365 effort as far as I'm concerned. People need to be working hard to make all of those cases every single day, and that's certainly what I'm doing.
So our next question was submitted through Facebook, and Denise is wondering, is there anything that can be done for us in the hospitality sector, specifically regarding our tourist friends from Canada?
Yeah. Well, stop punching Canada in the face and treat them with respect would be a good place to start. One of the things I think we should do in our state is make it clear that we don't agree with Trump. We think Canada's sovereignty is important. We think they are a valuable partner, and we respect them. And if Canada decides to stop coming, if Canadian citizens decide to stop coming to the US, that's just helping Trump. But I think we have to do outreach. I think we have to have communications with our Canadian friends. And look, tourism is a huge part of this. I spent a year up at Western Washington University in Bellingham, so close to Canada, and going back and forth to Canada was a huge part of being up there. And I know it's a huge part for a lot of people. The Toronto Blue Jays are coming to Seattle to play the Mariners on Friday, Saturday, and Sunday, and I'll be interested to see. Normally, we get a huge crowd coming down. Will we still get that huge crowd? And also the tariffs. I can tell you, speaking as the ranking member of the Armed Services Committee, we get a lot of material for defense from Canada. Now there's tariffs on that. We're jeopardizing that relationship and we're undermining the connection. And for what? Just so President Trump can insult Canada? I mean, no serious person in the United States of America thinks Canada should be our 51st state. And yet the president continues to hurl those insults at Canada and upset what is a very important economic relationship. So I think we need to push back and, for lack of a better way to put it, we need to show Canada some love, even as our president is undermining the relationship. We are the United States of America. We are not about one person. We're about the country as a whole, and we need to make that case. But I am worried about the damage that's being done to that relationship.
So the congressman and his staff put out a very informative e-newsletter, and you can get signed up to receive it right here, right now, by pressing *6 on your telephone keypad. So please get yourself signed up. It's so easy. Just press *6. Now we're heading back to Seattle, and we've got Sandra on the line with us. Hi, Sandra. You are live with Congressman Smith. What's on your mind?
Yeah, hi, Congressman Smith. Thank you so much for holding a town hall. My question has to do with federal employees. I happen to be one. I work at the Federal Aviation Administration, and I'm just really concerned that there's a huge brain drain happening in the federal government. Like, we're probably going to lose 40% of our executives to this latest round of deferred resignation. I have friends in other agencies, someone at Health and Human Services, 34 years and just locked out of the building. Like, we're not going to get those people back. And I work in aviation safety. Like, they're pretty important agencies and
Yes.
services within those agencies. So it's just very concerning to me that I mean, it's concerning that people are losing their jobs or feeling like they have no other choice but to leave based on a bunch of stuff they're doing, but also just all that knowledge. It's, not to mention like National Institute of Health and everything else. But so that's my concern is, is there anything that's happening in Congress or, what are your thoughts on that? Thank you.
Yeah, no, I share that concern. I think one of the big things we need to do, and what I've been doing publicly, is defend our federal workforce, because I think people have a total misimpression about it. What Trump is doing and what Musk is doing doesn't have anything to do with trying to make government more efficient and more effective. He's trying to weaken our federal government because he perceives it as a threat to him. You don't make something more efficient and more effective by coming in and randomly firing tens of thousands of people. There was no effort whatsoever made to do performance reviews or say, you're doing something important, we don't think that needs to be done. They just started randomly firing. And also, as you pointed out, in some cases, asking everybody to quit and, just locking the door and not letting them in, shutting down agencies and really treating them in a cruel and abusive manner. Designed hoping to get some of them to quit on their own. And so that entire approach is wrong. But the other thing I want people to understand about our federal workforce, and I make this point a lot, has not grown in numbers in 40 years. And I'm not talking about as adjusted for inflation or population. In real numbers, the number of federal employees is flat, while the amount of services that we receive as a country has gone up significantly. I mean, just in your world, FAA, how many more flights do we have bouncing around the country right now that you all have to manage than we had 40 years ago? How many more people on Social Security and Medicare? how many more veterans needing our care. And they have provided outstanding service. President Trump and Elon Musk want to act like federal employees are completely worthless and interchangeable. That is an unbelievable insult to people who have done an incredible service to this country. And to your point, it is going to undermine our ability to keep getting that work done. We need the FAA. We need to make sure that we can fly back and forth across the country safely. I certainly know that I do. We need the Veterans Administration. We need the Social Security Administration. We need NIH and CDC to battle diseases and help keep us safe. And the progress that we've made on all of those fronts is remarkable. And to denigrate it is really to weaken the United States of America and make us less able to protect our citizens and to protect our country. And I think we have to make that case. And I don't think enough people have been making that case as a way to push back on the cuts that President Trump is talking about. And then beyond that, give the same answer I gave to the first caller. We got to organize. We have to build up a new political coalition that presents a set of ideas, policies, and messages that the American people can get behind, because they very clearly rejected the current Democratic Party. And I say that without judgment. That's just merely a factual observation. And we can all differ about what aspects of that message have led us to that place. But I don't think anyone can disagree that we got to rebuild that brand. I think part of rebuilding that brand is to stop bashing on government and go out and show people what government can do and how it can, in fact, be part of a strong society, working side by side with the private sector. I don't think we've done a good enough job of that. And certainly the federal government. I mean, look, Bill Clinton and Al Gore back in the 90s, they did government efficiency. They went after efficiency and effectiveness in a very, very smart way. They didn't come in with a chainsaw and an attitude. They respectfully looked at the federal government and made it better. And that's the approach I think we need to take. And I think that needs to be part of our message for why what Trump is doing is so wrong for this country.
So our next question was submitted through Instagram, and Audrey wonders, what are you doing, especially on housing and protecting trans rights?
Yeah, two very important issues. On housing, I mentioned that a little bit earlier. Part of it, I think there are many federal programs that are important. LIHEAP, the Low-Income Housing Tax Credit, also various other funds out there that provide support for building affordable housing from the federal government. I think all of that is important. I have supported a bunch of housing projects here locally in different communities. The Mount Baker Housing Authorities building big, huge housing development down in Southeast Seattle, as is Yesler Terrace. I've worked with the Somali community, the Congolese community, the Ethiopian community, and the Filipino community, just to name a few, who built housing projects for affordable housing. I've helped support funds for that. We need to do that. So part of it is, yes, spending more money, but there is a much bigger part of it that is making housing more affordable. It is simply too expensive. And that was the $2 million 4-stall toilet example that I threw out there. The permitting that we require, the number of boards and communities that are required to sign off before we can build anything is paralyzing our ability to build things quickly and affordably. Also, I would submit a lot of the laws that have been passed that make it very difficult for landlords to collect rent have discouraged people from building housing as well and making those investments. In fact, there was a story, I forget who told me this, somebody said that, it's so difficult to get people to pay rent that even in like high-end apartments, people who obviously have the money are simply choosing not to pay. So one of the landlords responded, one thing that they could still do is they could impound cars. So they went into the parking garages and they started impounding all these Mercedes and BMWs and these expensive apartment complexes where people just aren't paying rent. If we make it so expensive to build housing, multifamily or single family, we'll never catch up. We'll never get there. So it's really important if housing is a priority, then let's streamline the process. Let's expand the zoning so you can build more types of housing in more places. And let's aggressively build housing. And we haven't done enough on that. I think every one time I do one of these town halls, I do a shout out to Ezra Klein. So I'll do one now. He's got a new book called Abundance, which is about how we began to fail to build things that we need to build. to support our society, give some really good ideas about how to get there. Trans rights, I share your concern. In fact, I'm sure you are very much aware the Supreme Court just yesterday, in a completely unsupportable ruling to my mind, upheld President Trump's ban on trans people serving in the military. I have spoken out against that when I was chair of the committee. I was instrumental in lifting the ban on trans people serving in the military and making sure that they could serve openly, as they did for a number of years, quite successfully. And what I really want to explain to people, everyone gets caught up in the weeds of who's playing, women's and girls' sports. What this is really about is a concerted effort to dehumanize trans people. And you look at the language that is used, that is specifically saying that trans people don't exist. There are only two genders, as you've heard. They're being targeted across this country and really dehumanized. So I think we have to stand up for equal rights. And the Trump administration is going in the exact opposite direction. I think that is shameful, bigoted, and wrong. And I think we need to continue to make that case for equality. And I will do that. We're in a hostile environment. Too much of the country has decided to blame the trans community for everything in a bigoted and idiotic way. We're going to fight back against that.
Do you have a question on your mind you'd like to ask Congressman Smith? All you need to do is press star 3 on your telephone keypad. Again, get involved in tonight's discussion. Please press star 3 if you have a question. Now we're going to chat with Henderson out in Seattle. Henderson, you are live on the call. Go ahead, please. Hello, Henderson. Are you still with us? Go ahead with your question now.
I actually have a better question than I actually started off with. I'm thinking about what's going on with Medicaid, and my concern is how we can find a way to get the budget in a place where we're not hurting people who have no place else to go, and using that to put money in the pockets of too many wealthy people. It just seems like that's what's happening again. Is there a way that you have in mind to stop that?
That is exactly what's happening, first of all, and that's, President Trump's budget, $6-7 trillion in tax cuts, and $880 billion in cuts to Medicaid. Look, I mean, we've walked down this road, Republican president after Republican president, where they continue to insist on cutting federal taxes, starting with George W. Bush back in 2001, to the detriment of our ability to pay the bills that we need to pay. And look, and I know there's some people who disagree with me. They're always talking about, well, I support this tax cut and that. The federal government should not be cutting taxes. We are $37 trillion in debt, and we have a lot of need. Now, you want to talk about state and local taxes? That's a whole different conversation. I do understand that property taxes and sales taxes on the local level go up and up and up and up, and I'm not sure we're getting our money's worth. I'm deeply concerned in King County as levy after levy after levy gets sent after us. But on the federal level, we have been cutting taxes for a very long time, and then we look up and say, well, gosh, the debt's so high, we have to cut health care for poor people. I believe passionately that the most important thing that we can do in this country is create opportunity for all. I think the number one issue that we face right now is that there is too much concentration of wealth and too many people struggling every day to pay their bills. Medicaid is one bridge to help people who are in those desperate situations, as is Medicare and Social Security and a bunch of other programs. So my answer is simple. Don't cut taxes. Now, I do support reforming the healthcare system. I support a universal access program where everybody is covered and where we actually make better decisions about how we spend money. Because one of the shocking facts about healthcare, we in the United States of America spend more money per capita on healthcare than any other country in the world, almost twice as much as the next closest country on a per capita basis. But our results are somewhere between 30th and 40th, depending on how you rank outcomes. We spend too much money on things that we do not need and do not help people, and we don't make the right decisions about how to use our healthcare system. If we had a universal access to healthcare system that was better regulated, we could provide more healthcare and save money. So healthcare taxes are the two best things we can do on that. The two things that the current Republican majority are completely ignoring in favor of cutting Medicaid for poor people to pay for taxes for rich people. It is as simple as that and as wrong as that. And I think we need to regressively make that case.
Thank you.
So next we're heading out to SeaTac, and we've got Sarah joining us. Welcome, Sarah. You're live with Congressman Smith. Go ahead with your question now.
Thank you. So my name is Sarah, and I want to thank you, Congressman Smith, for being part of the TRIO caucus. I and hundreds of other representatives from TRIO programs were in D.C. recently, and we spoke with one of your staff members.
Yeah.
For those of you who may not know what TRIO is, it's I think 8 programs at this point that support students who are first generation, low income, and or have a disability in preparing for and getting into and moving through and graduating from college. So as you are very well aware, last week's requested budget by the administration proposed eliminating the TRIO program and the Gear Up program and calling them relics, saying that it is no longer necessary because there's not as much of an obstacle for individuals in these situations to get into college. So, yes, I want to laugh at that too. So I know that we have recently asked people to sign on to the TRIO appropriations letter. Maybe you could talk a little bit about if there's been any conversations about that particular piece of things.
Yeah, my staff has talked to me about it, and I'm happy to sign on to that letter. And look, as I said just a moment ago, what makes America America, to my mind, is opportunity for all. It's never easy, but we do try to make sure that if you're willing to, as they say, work hard and play by the rules, you can get ahead. And we have to help people get there in the TRIO program. And the thing about it is, we're talking about a very small amount of money. That's off the top of my head. I don't know how much it is, but it's in the hundreds of millions of dollars, which in the federal budget isn't much. It's a small amount of money that leverages a big result. And that big result is to create opportunity for people who might not otherwise have it. And I think we need to make that case. And what the president's budget is doing to pay for the tax cuts is just devastating all of these relatively small, non-defense discretionary programs. And these are the programs in the areas of education and healthcare and transportation, other things that are really crucial to helping people. So I think the TRIO program is a great example of it. Sorry, I missed you when you were back. I had met with you before, but it's busy back here these days. So I'm glad you had the opportunity to meet with my staff. Love the program. I think it's a good argument for how, again, our federal government and our federal workforce can help people. So I appreciate your efforts on that, and I'm happy to be supportive.
It is great to see so many people are connected into this live telephone town hall with Congressman Smith. Don't forget, if you've got a question you'd like to ask, the Congressman's here to answer them. All you need to do is press *3 on your telephone keypad. And don't forget, you can also get enrolled in the Congressman's e-newsletter by pressing *6 on your telephone keypad during this call. So *3 to ask a question, *6 to get enrolled in the Congressman's e-newsletter. Now we're heading out to Newcastle. We've got Tiffany with us now. Tiffany, hello there. Go ahead with your question.
Hi, my name is Tiffany. I wanted to find out what coordinated work is being done to plan for coming back from disaster. How are we recording the things that are breaking and the knowledge being lost is referenced earlier, so that at some point, optimism holding, we can rebuild that what was broken or choose to build differently.
Yeah, I think a couple things we're doing on that. My staff has done a really good job. We have on our website we're regularly keeping track of various programs that are being cut, shut down, where federal employees are being fired. Certainly on foreign aid, USAID, MCC, just being zeroed out and completely eliminated. But the impacts on NIH, CDC, the FAA, all these different programs. we are keeping track of all of that and the impact that it is having. So part of it is to see that and to see where those funds are going to be needed. But again, I don't want to sound like a broken record, but I keep coming back to, okay, if we are able to stop what I see, and I know there may be some on the call who disagree with me, as kind of an attempted authoritarian takeover of our government, and also, so you got the authoritarian aspect of it, and then you got the economic aspect of it, which is primarily focused on people with a lot of money, making sure they get more, and not helping the people who are really struggling in this country. So if we are able to stand up against that, I think it's really important and imperative that we say, here's how we're going to make it work. And what are the concerns of the American people that led them to vote for Donald Trump in the first place and in the second place? And I think, I don't know, there's a lot of different things on the list, but number one on the top of that list is we have to reassure people that Democrats believe in enforcing the law. That's border security, that's dealing with crime, homelessness, drug abuse in our communities, that we are in favor of accountability and opportunity, absolutely, but that we can actually enforce the law, first of all. And second of all, we support standards. I think one thing, and I alluded to it earlier, but didn't really get into it too much, one of the things that really concerned people about where Democrats were at was our K-12 education system. I think people have seen standards reduced and in some cases eliminated. There are, no more gifted programs. Measuring achievement has sort of gone out of fashion. Discipline in schools is down so that people are concerned about their safety. And then I will say, I know this is probably something that my staff wishes I wouldn't say, our disastrous decision during the COVID pandemic to not give more opportunities to our children. Certainly, I think they should have been back in the classroom sooner than they were. I think there was enough science that showed us that should have been happening, but also in terms of activities. We wouldn't even let our kids go out and play in groups outside, even long after it made sense. Particularly bitter about that. My son was a junior in high school and was a soccer player, and his last 2 seasons pretty much got shut down. Eventually, they let them go back out and play wearing masks while they played soccer outside. So
that doesn't quite get to the question that I'm asking, though. I think it does. The question is, how do we rebuild this? How do we rebuild the federal government? How do we rebuild people's confidence? I'm sorry, go ahead. Let me clarify, because apparently my question was not specific enough. If you have a plumbing problem in your house and a bunch of pipes freeze, and you go to run water back on, and you find there is one random pipe you didn't know existed, but it turned out was doing something useful, and you turn the water off. If people leave right then, you need to know there was this one random pipe that you didn't know to look for. I mean the devil in the details. I mean the little processes in the Social Security Administration that take care of this weird little loophole, the little stuff that when you're in the weeds, it's really easy to become institutionalized knowledge, but is critical for functioning. And it might be that we choose not to have that function, but if we don't know what we've lost, we may not be able to repair or rebuild anything functional.
Sure, and that gets down into a layer and a level depending on agency by agency. And look, I'm not going to deny that government could be more efficient and more effective, and that there are ways to find those, pipes that you just described, and what works and what doesn't work. I think part of the problem is what one of the earlier callers alluded to. We're getting rid of a lot of knowledge and a lot of talent and firing them. And I think we're going to have to be prepared to bring some of those people back to answer those questions. People have worked closely in all of these different agencies who can tell you how to make it work better. I mean, that's the missed opportunity here. To the extent that there is waste and inefficiency in the federal government, I think a lot of times it's because rules and regulations are forced upon our federal employees, so they are not free to do their jobs as efficiently and effectively as they could. So I guess the best thing we can do is keep track of those employees, bring the ones back that we can bring, and talk to the other ones about what we ought to be doing to make government more efficient and more effective. But look, I can't say that we're going to know exactly how to, perfectly run the Social Security Agency or the FAA or the CDC and all those other things. I do think that my comments about how we handled the pandemic are still important in this conversation, because that's part of it. That's part of reassuring people that the federal government can learn and get better so that they are supportive. Because premise behind your question has to be the public has to let us do that. We are, for the moment, a representative democracy. They will vote. And they will vote in candidates based on whether or not they think they're getting this stuff done right. And we have to be responsive to that and understand how do we make government work better and make that case. But I think we need to preserve as much of that institutional knowledge as possible. So to your point, to your analogy, we have the person who knows where that pipe is. And then we empower them. Instead of drowning them in rules and regulations, say, how do we do this better? And again, this has been done. Bill Clinton and Al Gore reinventing government. They took advantage of all those opportunities and they tried to clean up a lot of these different processes. I think we should continue to do that. I think everybody working in government, whether you're at the city, whatever level, city, county, federal government, should come at the problem every day saying, how can we do this better? How can we more efficiently deliver services and goods to the American people that we're supposed to serve? And I think we got away from that, was my point. It's not just Republicans who got away from that. I think Democrats got away from that too in some instances. So we have to rebuild the government so that it is better, more efficient, more effective, and so that more people believe in it.
So our next caller is Rebecca from Kent. Rebecca, you are live with Congressman Smith. Go ahead with your question.
Hi, thank you, Congressman Smith. Actually, my question is related to what you just said. You keep talking about how we need to rebuild the government and make it more effective. And in my entire adult life, I've basically seen Republican administrations come in, tear stuff apart, and Democratic administrations have to try and spackle over the damage in the 4 to 8 years that they're allowed before people get impatient and elect Republicans again. And I want to know if the Democrats, who I know are not currently in power, but if they are given power in 2028 or even in 2026, is the Democratic Party prepared to actually address the big issues like judicial reform, like voting rights, like big changes to make sure that this can't happen again? Or are they just going to keep spackling around the edges?
Yeah. Well, on voting rights in particular, we had 2 significant voting rights bills that when we were in charge of Congress, we passed out of the House repeatedly. We didn't have the votes in the Senate to pass it. So we definitely tackled the voting rights issue, and that will be a number 1 priority. But, you do have to have votes. The Republicans are running into that to some extent as they try to push their agenda through. We have a complex system of checks and balances that makes it easier to stop things than it does to get things done. But I think it is imperative right now that we have a set of priorities. We say these are the bills that are most priorities. And you mentioned a couple of them that really are important. I think voting rights has to be at the top of that list, protecting our representative democracy, reinvigorating the Civil Rights Act, the Voting Rights Act, that has been gutted and undermined our democracy in so many places. I think that's one incredibly important thing we need to do. So yes, we do have very specific, we need to develop more specific plans. I think there is disagreement within the Democratic Party as to what those plans should be. We need to straighten that out and have a clear agenda. And we should be pushing that agenda right now. Just because you don't have the votes doesn't mean you can't get the votes. You can begin to persuade people. You can make the case for what you're doing. You can figure out who you need to persuade, and you can go persuade them. And I don't think that process should wait until we get the House back in 2026 if we do. I think we should be engaged in it right now. Those priorities on economic opportunity, on closing the wealth gap that we have. What are the programs that we're going to put in place? Things like increasing the minimum wage, paying people more for overtime, strengthening unions so that working people can get a decent wage and benefit package. I'd do something like get rid of stock buybacks so the corporations have to take their profits and turn them back into their workers and their community more than just their shareholders. I think we need to have those ideas, and I'm working with some members back here and others to try and generate them, because I think you're right. We need to have a clear agenda. We need to advocate for it aggressively.
So I encourage everybody that's on the line with us to take a second and get yourself enrolled in the Congressman's very informative e-newsletter. And you can do that by simply pressing *6 on your telephone keypad. Again, get signed up to receive the Congressman's e-newsletter. Please press *6 on your telephone keypad right now. Now we're off to Bellevue, and we've got Elizabeth joining us. Hello, Elizabeth. You are live on the call. Go ahead with what's on your mind.
Hi, thank you very much, Congressman Smith. I appreciate your work and your positions that you're taking. And I'm wondering, one of the things you're well known for is your ability to work across the aisle. And I'm wondering, I've been very shocked at what happened to all the moderate Republicans. And I've worked in politics for a while, and I know that people do believe in the Constitution on both sides of the aisle. And I'm not sure where those people went. And I'm wondering if you have any hope to bring them.
Yeah. Sorry. Yes, no, absolutely. And look, I think that the better way I would sum up how I approach things is I'm a very practical person. I will work with who I have to work with to solve problems. And I try not to be overly judgmental about that, because I find if we lock ourselves up in our own little worlds and amongst our team, that undermines representative democracy. You got to figure out how to get along with people. If you're going to have a civil society that is not violent and chaotic. And I try to do that. And by doing that, I have very strong, passionate beliefs in a bunch of things, but I try to keep wide space for other people. I mean, people have different ways of looking at things and they disagree. And I don't think, as I said, we should be overly judgmental about that. And throughout the years in the state Senate and Congress, I've gotten a lot done with Democrats and Republicans and whoever I've had to work with because of that approach. I am worried now because Trump has such a cult-like power over the party. Senator Murkowski up in Alaska said it best. A lot of Republicans are afraid of Trump and the MAGA movement. And they're afraid both from an electoral standpoint, but they're also afraid because they get death threats if they dare to disagree with Trump. Their families get threatened. I remember Anthony Gonzalez, good member of Congress, Republican of Ohio, one of the 10 who voted for impeachment the second time. Was a former football player, was not really that political, but he got involved and got elected to Congress. He decided not to run again, and he had a very blunt way of saying it. I got off the plane after the impeachment vote. 4 local police officers greeted me at the door and said, "Yeah, we're going to have to escort you through the airport." And he said, this job isn't worth that. So he didn't run again. He said, "I'm not." So I am worried about the pressure that is coming down. Now, I think part of what we need to do is we need to not completely abandon the half of the country, or the 49% of the country anyway. Or was it 48.5? I forget exactly, that voted for Trump. We can't abandon them all. They had reasons for that. And I think we need to reach out and listen and work with them. And I've tried doing that with some colleagues. The Armed Services Committee continues to be a very bipartisan committee. Mike Rogers is the chairman from Alabama. Is a good friend. I work with him. We are looking at ways to reform the Pentagon right now, to do acquisition reform so that we can make the Pentagon more efficient and more effective. And we're working in a bipartisan way to do that. So I would urge people, this is going to come off wrong, not to declare war on every single Republican. Now, if you've seen my social media posts, if you've seen my interviews, I am very aggressively pushing back against Trump's attempted fascist takeover of the United States of America, and I will not stop doing that. I don't think that requires us to treat every single Republican as the enemy. I think we have to forcefully push back on what Trump is doing and strive to maintain the ability to include and grow the group of people who feel that way. Obviously, we didn't have enough. If we'd had enough, we wouldn't have lost in 2024. So we got to figure out some way to be aggressive in defending our Constitution and our country and try to expand our coalition in doing that. So that's what I try to do. It's tough. I mean, look, some of what the Republicans are doing, I mean, I know Mike Johnson. He served on the Armed Services Committee when I was chairman. I got to know him a little bit. I am not fond of the way he is approaching these issues, and I have told him that. So it's not about not standing up. It's about trying to figure out how can we bring the country along to recognize the threat that Trump presents. And then again, my broken record thing, show them that there is a better way and a better path.
All right, next up, we've got Matthew joining us from Renton. Matthew, you are live. Go ahead with your question, please.
Hi, thanks for taking the question. Earlier, you had mentioned that the excuse me, the public needs to organize, and we need to protest, and we need to get out there. And I feel like we're seeing a lot of that. And also,
Yeah.
the Democratic Party needs to create a message. And what is our better plan? And here's the better options. And frankly, I'm hearing that from Democrats all over the country. Watch the news; that's what they're saying. When are we going to see that? What are you doing to create that? Thank
Yeah.
you.
Well, sorry. Go ahead. Okay. Yeah. What I'm doing is I'm working with as many Democrats as possible to try to build support for that. And the thing that I'm doing that's a little bit different, I think, is I am talking, as I have here tonight, about some things that I think Democrats didn't get right. And I think the first step, I mean, we can go to the public and say, you were wrong. You never should have voted for Trump. And yeah, I mean, that's going to be tough. Now, I think we can also say, okay, you voted for Trump, but you didn't vote for these tariffs. You didn't vote for, firing hundreds of thousands of employees and, jeopardizing Social Security and cutting Medicaid and all of that. We make that case, but I think it's also a stronger case if we can say, we hear you. We made some mistakes, and I outlined already in this call some very specific ones. I think enforcing the law, border security, and our approach to criminal justice and drug abuse and issues like that. I think we need to come up with a plan that says, look, we don't have to go to Republican mass incarceration and snatching people off the streets without due process, but we do have a plan that will keep our community safe. On economics, I think the biggest thing Democrats need to say is we are not just about as many free programs as possible. We want to help people be self-sufficient. We want to live up to the work hard, play by the rules, get ahead thing. Not everything's going to be free. Free healthcare, free education, free transportation, free housing. I think that turns off a lot of people in this country. They want to know that that Democrats are going to respect, individual hard work and achievement and reward it. And I think we can have a better economic message on that. I mentioned also, part of what we can do is we can support working people, minimum wage, overtime, unions. Those are all things that are helping people who are working get their worth. It's not a handout. It's rewarding them for the work that they are doing to help strengthen the country and spread prosperity. We can also, like I said, if we came up with a plan, here's what we're going to do to make building housing cheaper so we can build more housing. I think those are some pretty core issues right there that we can lay an agenda out. And also in states like Washington, by the way, where Democrats actually run things, we can do that there. We can run the state and we can show that we're going to build more housing, that we're going to have a functional criminal justice system, that we're going to deal intelligently with the homelessness problem that we have. So that is the single biggest thing we can do is show results. And you're starting to see some of that. As I said, I think there is a responsiveness. San Francisco in particular has made a number of changes on these policy areas, but that's the message to get out there. What I don't want Democrats to fall into the trap of is thinking that all we have to do is criticize Trump as aggressively as possible. I think there's a lot of great issues we can talk about. And also, I've talked a lot about, we need to talk about what Democrats didn't do well. We've done some things pretty well, too. I think one of the previous callers pointed it out. If you look at the economy, and we've gone sort of Republican, Democrat president, the economy has always gotten better under Democratic presidents. We add more jobs. The economy grows more. The stock market gets higher. I think we need to make that case. The Republicans do a great job of saying that they're better for the economy, but the actual numbers do not bear that out. So I think part of it also is saying, let's aggressively advocate for our right policies. And that also is about picking good messengers. I've been very public for a long time that I thought it was a catastrophic mistake for Joe Biden to try and run for a second term for as long as he did. I and a bunch of other people did say that that wasn't a good idea, and yet it went forward, and we didn't have an effective messenger on all of these issues. That too matters. We're going to have people who can articulate a case and aggressively prosecute a case to the American people. So all of that is part of what we need to do.
So, Congressman, it looks like we're just under 5 minutes left in today's live telephone town hall. Do you have time for one more question,
Yes.
you think?
Let's take one
All
more
right.
question, and I'll close out an answer to whatever that is.
Okay, here we go with it. We've got Sally from Bellevue on the line with us now. Sally, welcome. Go ahead with your question, please.
Hi, Congressman. So you've mentioned that it's great to go out and protest, but organizing is, you've stressed that a few times. I'd like you to explain what you mean by that.
Yeah, well, I guess what I mean by that is, build a coalition. And building a coalition would be about advocating for a specific policy idea and trying to get more people to support that. And you can draw attention to it by getting people together in a public square and talking about, we need more unions, we need better protection for civil rights, we need to stop all the federal employee cuts that we've talked about. That is certainly one way to bring attention to the issue. But I think it's insufficient. You also need to form organizations that then lobby on the local, state, and federal level to advocate for these policies. And we've done that in different places. I always, on foreign aid, there's a group that I've worked with for decades now called Results. And what Results does is they are advocates for various foreign aid programs, and they recruit district by district all across the country, individual average citizens who care about foreign aid. And then they have them come together, come up with specific policy objectives, and then lobby members of Congress, but also business leaders and other community leaders to get them on board so that you build this support base for whatever your idea and your issue is. And that's basic grassroots politics. I do also think that we have to be careful when it comes, I don't think it's helpful to set Tesla dealerships on fire. It may be satisfying, but I think that's part of the concern that people have with Democrats is, that is somewhat lawless. And that doesn't give us a good look. So let's be respectful of other people while we organize and make sure that our voices are heard. So that's what I mean by that. Just like anything, I mean, not all protests are good, not all protests are bad. It depends on how you do it, what you're asking for, and how you present yourself to the American people to try to grow and expand our support base. Now, I'll close by saying that I understand there's a lot of people out there who are scared. They are scared of what Trump is doing to this country. And part of what they need to hear is that there's people out there who are going to fight. They do need to hear that. And that's why I'm doing more teletown halls than I've ever done. I'm on social media. I'm taking meetings throughout my district. I'm speaking out loudly and making it clear that that's how I feel. That is part of it, yes. But the other part is to reach out to people beyond that group of people who are already concerned about Trump. How do you expand it? How do you get some of these people who either didn't show up or voted for Trump? Just showing up and protesting, I don't think that in and of itself is going to get those people. You got to go to where they are. Listen, bring in and broaden your base. It's basic coalition political, organizing. Nothing complicated about it. You know where people live, where they get their information. You can call and message and try to build and grow the support base. And we've seen that a number of organizations have formed. There's a South Sound Indivisible group now, or South County Indivisible group, that didn't exist before Trump was elected. It's grown to hundreds of people. They have meetings, they talk about issues, and they expand their support. So it's basic political organizing that has to happen in multiple places and on multiple levels. There's no one thing that gets it done. It takes a coordinated and growing effort, which I am beginning to see in a number of different places. I'm participating in it, and I see a whole lot of other people participating in it. So we just got to keep up that work. Well, thank you very much. As always, an incredibly informative and helpful conversation. I'll keep doing these on a regular basis. Last thing, please reach out, contact my office. This is not the only opportunity. Send emails, call us. I know a lot of people are. It's really helpful to hear from you. Please keep doing that. And I appreciate you giving me some time tonight.
Echoing the words of thanks from the Congressman, thank you, everyone, for joining this live telephone town hall with Congressman Adam Smith. If you'd like to stay up to date on the Congressman's work, you can follow him on Facebook, X, and Instagram. The handle Rep. Adam Smith, as well as on Blue Sky. at adamsmith.house.gov. Now, at this point in the call, you can still get subscribed to the Congressman's e-newsletter. Just stay on the line. Leave us your name and email address after you hear the tone. Thanks again for joining us this evening. We hope you stay healthy and safe and have a great night. This concludes our event. Goodbye.